stories of old, legends, sagas, and epics. Collectively, we call them folklore. Every culture has them, and every soul yearns for them. People can't help but seek these tales out, even if it means paying a heavy price just to hear a few words. And this story, it's one of the greatest ever told. It's a folklore about an unparalleled knight, a man once feared by all who resembled a pitch-black demon on the battlefield. This is the legend of Nosferatu of the Claude Empire. But every legend has a beginning. We go back to April 15th, year 209 of the Claudian calendar. In the dense Inns forest, a small rearguard of less than 300 men stands against a tidal wave of thousands. Leading them is a young man with messy black hair and eyes filled with iron resolve. This is Leonard Leo, the 8th imperial prince of the Claude Empire. His mission? Stop the enemy right here at all costs. The stakes couldn't be higher. They have to hold the line so the main troops can escape. You can see the fear on the soldiers' faces. They know this is likely a suicide mission. As the men pray to the gods for salvation, Leonard Leo simply clenches his sword. He's seen the hell of war before, and he knows that prayers won't save them now. Only steel will. Interrupting the heavy silence is a friendly voice. Meet Alan, conseiller Quabatuacadonia, a blonde teenager and Leonard's loyal friend. He tries to lighten the mood, asking if the prince shouldn't be praying too. But Leonard Leo is sharp and focused. No need, he replies, his fearlessness leaving Alan looking a bit flustered. In this desperate situation, Leonard's calm is almost unsettling. The surrounding soldiers can't help but laugh. The tension breaks just for a second as they realize their commander is as gutsy as ever. It's nothing new for Leo. Alan, conseiller Quabatuacadonia, grins, noting how their conversations are always the same. Having someone so fearless at their head makes the men feel silly for even having cold feet. The banter is over. It's time. Leonard, Leo, and Alan share a determined look. They're ready to dive into the chaos together. Leonard, Leo, stares down the path, his eyes narrowing. He doesn't need gods. He's spent years Renluyen for this, and the only way out is through his own strength. Here they come. The ground shakes as the enemy army charges forward with a deafening roar. The clash is inevitable. Before his men can even react, Leonard, Leo, dashes forward alone. His speed is incredible, leaving everyone shouting for him to wait. He's not waiting, he's leading. The first enemies to reach him find out too late that they've made a fatal mistake. With a single, brutal swing, Leonard, Leo, carves through their ranks, blood spraying into the air. He's a whirlwind of steel. Every movement is precise, efficient, and utterly lethal. The enemy can barely see the strike before it hits. One enemy tries to taunt him, calling him a little boy, but Leonard Leo doesn't even flinch. He's already past him, his blade spinning in a deadly dance. I'll never stop. Leonard Leo roars. He's fighting for more than just himself. He's fighting for the companions standing behind him. He won't let a single enemy through, even if it kills him. Inspired by their prince's bravery, Alan, conseiller Quabatuacadonia, rallies the men. Follow Leo. They charge as one, their spirits reignited by Leonard's sheer willpower. The forest erupts into a chaotic battle. Push! Leonard Leo commands, his voice cutting through the din of clashing metal as they work to fortify their position. Clang! Leonard Leo parries a spear strike so hard that the enemy's weapon shatters. He doesn't miss a beat, immediately transitioning into a counterattack. But war is unpredictable. Leonard's blade snaps against a heavy shield. The enemy laughs, thinking they finally have the unlucky bastard where they want him. Now's their chance, or so they think. The enemy lunges for what should be a killing blow, but Leonard's Leo reflexes border on the supernatural. He catches the incoming spearhead barehanded, leaving the soldier paralyzed in pure disbelief. What kind of monster has reflexes like these? The man gasps, realizing too late that he's no longer fighting a mere boy. In one fluid, brutal motion, Leonard, Leo, redirects the force, driving a jagged blade through his opponent's throat. As Alan, conseiller Quabatoak Adonia, watches from the sidelines, the sheer intensity of the scene makes it clear. The boy he grew up with is transforming into the terrifying legend of folklore right before his eyes. Leonard, Leo, is a force of nature. He doesn't just fight. He carves a path through the Admove ranks, his every move a blur of lethal precision. He grabs an enemy's weapon mid-swing, using their own momentum to deliver a devastating slash. The air is thick with the sound of steel and the cries of the fallen. Amidst the carnage, Leonard, Leo, flashes a brief, fierce grin at his friend. "Sorry I'm always like this, Alan," he shouts over the din. Alan, conseiller Quabatoak Adonia, just laughs it off, his loyalty unshakable. "Don't worry about it. We're friends, aren't we?" In this hell, their bond is the only thing that feels real. The battlefield is a churning sea of soldiers. Leonard's tiny force is holding, pushing back against the odds. "Keep this momentum going," someone screams. "Don't stop, KO Arch." Every stomp, every roar is a defiance against the death that surrounds them. On the other side, the Admove soldiers are starting to crack. They were told there were less than 300 men left, but these survivors are fighting like demons. "What the hell are you waiting for?" An officer barks, his voice trembling with a fear he can't quite hide. The Admove army is being pushed back, and they can't understand how. How is this one boy, Leonard, Leo, not faltering under these numbers? Then a horn blasts in the distance. A lone figure on horseback appears, radiating a command that stops hearts. "Excellent. You all held your ground well." The mood shifts instantly. And Leonard, Leo, breathes, a rare moment of relief washing over his face. The soldiers erupt in cheers that drown out the sounds of combat. It's Lady Rosalia. Lady Rosalia is here. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, charges into view, her presence alone worth 1,000 men. "We gotten this far. We're only a step away from Cursant," she bellows, her voice echoing through the forest. "We'll break the enemy's pursuit here. We'll all make it out of here alive." High above the fray, Rosalia raises her sword, silhouetted against the light. The temporary retreat they were forced into is over. This is the moment they turn the tide and reclaim their strength. The army's roar of RAHH shakes the very trees. "Alan, kon ka ko batuk Adonia, es patikali beaming." That's our Lady Rosalia. She boosted everyone's morale even more. Leonard, Leo, can only agree, a determined spark in his eyes. Her arrival has changed everything. As Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, rides past, a symbol of power and status, Leonard, Leo, watches her closely. Even though she could have escaped with the main troops, she chose to stay and fight in the mud with them. There really is no match for her. Memories flicker through Leonard's mind, the years she spent teaching him, protecting him when no one else would. He clenches his fist, a silent vow forming in his heart. This time, he won't be the one being protected. He will be the shield for his aunt and his companions. The battle rages on, more brutal than ever. Men are dying on both sides, coughing up blood and gasping for air. We are fine with sacrificing ourselves if it means the main troops can retreat. One soldier cries out. Leonard, Leo, plunges back into the melee, his blade thirsty for enemy blood. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, watches Leonard, Leo, from her horse, her expression a complex mix of pride and worry. She sees the boy she raised becoming a man on this bloody ground. For a moment, she just watches him, her hand tied on the reins. "Hang in there, just a little longer, everyone," she shouts, urging her men to hold the line. Leonard, Leo, looks back at her, a confident smirk on his face. Here we go. They're in sync, a master and apprentice facing the end of the world together. Suddenly, the sound of galloping hooves approaches from the rear. It's not the enemy, it's their own scouts. A cry goes up from the ranks. "We're in trouble. Lady Rosalia." The reinforcements they were counting on might not be enough. A young woman named Shara arrives on a lathered horse, tears of frustration in her eyes. Shara, why did you come back? Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, demands. The news is dire. The main troops are under a surprise attack by elite enemy cavalry who broke through the hidden animal trails. Rosalia's face twists into a snarl of rage. Shit! She curses, looking back at the overwhelming numbers they're already facing. She turns to Leonard, Leo, her voice like iron. Leonard, I'm leaving you in charge here for a while. Understood. There's no time for proper goodbye. Let's go, Shara, Rosalia shouts, turning her horse toward the main army. Leonard, Leo, doesn't hesitate for a second. Yes, he roars, diving back into the thick of the fight to cover her departure. And just like that, Leonard Leo is alone again at the head of the rear guard. He stands with his back to us, a lone figure against the encroaching chaos of the forest. The enemy's roar is deafening, but his resolve is even louder. Alan, Consier, Quabatuacadonia, rushes to his side, his voice strained. Leo, what do we do? The soldiers are looking to them now, the weight of their lives resting squarely on Leonard's young shoulders. It's time for a decision. Leonard, Leo, clenches the hilt of his sword until his knuckles turn white. If my aunt said she's leaving me in charge, he mutters to himself, I can't afford to yield a single step. This isn't just a battle anymore. It's a test of everything he's ever learned. Everyone, K.O. Arch. With a roar that rivals the gods, Leonard, Leo, leads his men into a final, desperate push. They don't just hold the line. They smash into the enemy, a collective force of will that refuses to be broken. As Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, rides away, she takes one last look back at the chaos. A small smile touches her lips amidst the grit and sweat. He's gotten quite dependable, she thinks. The seed she planted years ago has finally grown into a warrior. To understand the origins of the warrior Leonard, Leo, has become, we must journey back 11 years. July, year 198 of the Claudian calendar. In the shadow of the Grand Palace, a tragedy was unfolding that would scar his soul forever. Inside the chapel, the atmosphere is suffocating, not from sorrow, but from the poisonous mockery of the aristocrats. They stand around the coffin of Liza, Liza_004, whispering cruel insults about the commoner who dared to be empress. For the small boy listening in the shadows, this is the first taste of a heartless world. At just 5 years old, Leonard, Leo, is already learning the cruelty of the world. While he sobs for his mother, the shadows of the nobles loom over him like vultures. They aren't mourning, they're celebrating. To them, this funeral is a joyous occasion, a long-awaited chance to wash the taint of a commoner from their royal lineage. The air in the chapel is thick with malice. Leonard's father, the king, is conveniently absent, leaving his son alone to face the snickering aristocrats. If only that mongrel had died with her, too. One whispers, their eyes fixed on the small boy weeping before the coffin of Liza, Liza_004. They see him as nothing but a mistake. In the depths of his despair, Leonard, Leo, prays for someone, anyone, to save him. Wham! The chapel doors are kicked open with a thunderous bang. A powerful voice cuts through the noble's chatter like a blade. What a noisy bunch! You scum! It's Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, and she isn't here to play nice. The nobles can only watch in stunned silence as Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, marches down the aisle, her presence commanding and fierce. Leonard, Leo, looks up, his eyes wide and blurry with tears. Who is this woman who dares to defy the entire imperial court? Rosalia reaches the coffin, her hard exterior softening just for a moment. I'm sorry. Liza, she whispers, her head bowed in genuine grief. I couldn't make it in time. It's a quiet moment of vulnerability amidst the cold, judgmental atmosphere of the palace. Then, she turns her attention to the small, trembling boy. Chin up, Leonard, she says, her voice firm but not unkind. She even manages a small, wry smile. Goodness, you're letting your handsome face go to waste. It's the first time anyone has looked at him with anything other than contempt. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, crouches down to his level, her gaze searching. "Have you ever seen your mother cry?" she asks. Leonard Leo is taken aback. The memory of his mother's gentle face is all he has left. A memory of Liza_004, flashes through his mind. She was always strong, always smiling for him even when things were hard. "Listen, Leonard, no matter how painful things get, you should always face forward." Those are her final words to him. He realizes now what he has to do. With a massive effort, Leonard Leo gulps back his tears and shakes his head. "I should never water the seeds of sorrow," he repeats to himself, echoing his mother's wisdom. He wipes his nose, trying to find the strength she always wanted for him. Puff! A heavy, warm hand lands on his head. "That's right," Rosalia says. It's a simple gesture, but for Leonard Leo, it's everything. In this moment, the weight of his loneliness begins to lift. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, looks at him with a mix of respect and sorrow. "Those are words that I taught her," she explains. "She's not just a stranger. She was his mother's friend, her ally. And now she's his. It's okay now. I'll be with you from here on out." Leonard Leo feels his heart thump in his chest. For the first time since his mother died, he feels safe. Rosalia's smile is the first ray of light he's seen in a long time. As they stand in the middle of the hostel chapel, Rosalia's voiceover rings clear. "I want you to grow up to be strong, brave, and kind." She's already planning his future, a future far away from this den of vipers. Just like Liza_004, she wants him to be a person of character. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, doesn't wait for permission from the nobles or the king. She looks back one last time at the world she's about to leave behind and gives Leonard a simple command: "Come with me." Without a moment's hesitation, Leonard Leo runs after her. They leave the cold stone chapel and the cruel laughter behind, stepping out through the doors and into the brilliant sunlight. He's not just leaving a funeral, he's leaving his old life. "Yes," Leonard shouts, a bright, genuine smile finally breaking across his face. He's following the only person who has ever stood up for him, and for the first time, he's excited about what comes next. As they travel away from the palace, Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, lays out the cold truth. In this empire, Leonard Leo has no allies left. Not even his father will stand for him. That's why you must at least learn to be able to protect yourself. She's not going to coddle him. She's going to forge him into a warrior. "Can you do it?" she asks, her eyes sharp. You can't have a half-hearted resolve. Leonard Leo doesn't blink. "Yes," he shouts back, nodding with everything he has. Rosalia smirks. "That's what I like to hear. Then I'll first give you something precious for protecting yourself." Thump! Leonard Leo nearly falls over as Rosalia hands him his first sword. "NGH, that's so heavy," he grunts, his small arms trembling under the weight of the steel. "This isn't a toy. It's a tool for survival." "Your first sword," Rosalia says, watching him with an expectant look. Despite the weight, Leonard Leo is determined to swing it. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, seems satisfied with his spirit. She introduces a scruffy-looking knight to be his master. "I approve of him. Have this guy see how you're doing when I can't." Leonard is ecstatic. "Master, I look forward to learning from you." The knight just scratches his head, thinking it might not be such a bad gig after all. The journey continues, and the scruffy knight quickly realizes what he's gotten himself into. Leonard Leo is tireless, always eager to learn, while Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, prepares her household to depart. "Prepare to depart," she commands. She's taking Leonard to the one place where he can truly grow, her own territory. Leonard Leo peers out the carriage window, his eyes wide with wonder. "Aunt, what's this place?" he asks. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, leans back, a look of quiet pride on her face. "It's my territory," she begins. The scenery is changing from the gray stones of the palace to the vibrant greens of the wild. The state of Alexis. Starting today, This place will be your second hometown. The view is breathtaking. A lush, fertile valley surrounded by majestic mountains, with a grand castle nestled in the distance. This is Alexis, a land of freedom and strength. Leonard, Leo, is mesmerized by the sheer scale of the landscape. Alexis is a world away from the cold, stone walls of the imperial palace. Here, the air carries the scent of freedom and wild mountains, and for the first time in his life, he feels like he can truly breathe. This isn't just a new territory, it's the start of a whole new life. As their carriage winds along the crystal-clear lakeside, the vibrant greens of the valley stretch as far as the eye can see. Magnificent, isn't it? Rosalia notes, watching her nephew's wide-eyed wonder. Leonard can only nod, unaware that this very land, and the town of Lynt just over the horizon, will be the forge that tempers him into a warrior. Lynt isn't as grand or flamboyant as the imperial capital, but for Leonard, Leo, it's a breath of fresh air. He peers out the carriage window, mesmerized by the quaint buildings and the vibrant energy of a town that feels alive in a way the palace never did. You'd be greatly mistaken to underestimate it as just the countryside, Rosalia reminds him. This is the heart of Alexis. The streets of Lynt are bustling with people trading, talking, and simply living. It's a place that knows how to put up a good fight, but it knows how to enjoy peace even better. Leonard takes it all in, feeling the heavy atmosphere of his old life finally start to lift. There's a different spark in the people here. Regardless of their status, everyone has lively, shining eyes. They aren't the hollow, judgmental aristocrats Leonard is used to. These are people who work hard and take pride in their land. It's a community, not just a court. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, leans in next to him, a rare, soft look on her face. There's not a single person here who will look down on you, she promises. In Alexis, your character is what matters, not your birth. For the first time, Leonard Leo feels like he might actually belong somewhere. Years pass, and the small, crying boy is a distant memory. Leonard Leo trains until his body screams and sweat stings his eyes. His skills have sharpened to a deadly edge, enough to put most adults to shame. He's no longer just trying to survive. He's learning to master the blade. He's not alone in his grueling training. He meets Alan, Conseiller Kwabatuak Adonia, a talented swordsman from Adonia who has come to Alexis to study. They spar, push each other to their limits, and forge a brotherhood in the dirt and heat of the training grounds. You're pretty good. Lao! Alan shouts as they fist bump, a bond established that will last a lifetime. But Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, is a demanding mentor. She knows a warrior needs more than just a sword, so she piles books in front of him. If he's stupid, it makes him look unattractive, she declares, ignoring Leonard's look of utter despair as he realizes he has to conquer history and politics alongside his combat training. Every night, he's buried in books, determined to meet her expectations. The physical training is even more brutal. Rosalia is a harsh master, shouting that he'll die instantly in battle if he doesn't put his back into it. She's relentless, always pushing him for more. Yet, in the quiet moments when he thinks she's not looking, she watches him study with a secret, proud smile on her face. She sees the legend he is becoming. After another day of near defeat against his aunt, Leonard, Leo collapses, frustrated that he still can't even get close to her level. He's panting, his body aching, but Rosalia just offers her hand with a smirk. No, we're done for today. But to make up for it, come with me for a bit. Every warrior needs a break, even him. They end up at a rowdy tavern run by Uncle Matthew. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, is a completely different person here, drunk, burping, and laughing loudly with the locals. Leonard, Leo, sits by, eating his stew while everyone pities him for having to keep her company every day. But as he watches her tell her stories, he wouldn't trade this for anything. Over a giant mug of booze, Rosalia shares the fire that drives her. People laughed at her when she married into this nowhere town, but she swore to make Alexis richer than the capital itself. That's what I live for, she says with drunken conviction. Leonard, Leo, just smiles, his heart full. This woman gave him a home, and she gave him a dream to believe in. The night ends with Leonard, Leo, piggybacking a mumbling, drunk Rosalia through the moonlit streets of El Wyanty. She's reliving her youth, and he's realizing that this land, her land, has become his second hometown. He carries her with a gentle strength, knowing he's exactly where he's supposed to be. "Aunt, thank you," Leonard whispers into the quiet night. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, doesn't open her eyes, but a small, satisfied "ha" escapes her lips. They don't need many words. They understand each other perfectly. They're family in the ways that actually matter. As they cross the bridge under the full moon, the silhouette of the young man carrying his mentor is a quiet moment of peace. "No, thank you, Leonard," Rosalia thinks. He's not just her successor. He's the light she's been protecting all these years. But the shadows are already closing in. Peace is a fragile thing. March, year 208 of the Claudian calendar. The Edmove Empire begins its invasion, and Alexis, the far north state, is their first target. The map is drawn in blood as the enemy regularly invades every 10 years. But this time, the stakes are different. A hellish battle is about to begin. The military buildup is staggering. Against the enemy's massive force of 30,000, Alexis can only muster 10,000 cavalry. Leonard Leo, now a fully grown warrior in gleaming armor, sits tall on his horse. He watches the horizon, the weight of the coming conflict settling on his shoulders. The time for training is officially over. Rosalia, Lady of Alexis, leads from the front, her armor scarred from previous battles. This is her fourth time defending this land. But for her nephew, it's the beginning of his true trial. The army thunders behind them, ready to fight for their home. "We've fended them off 3 times in the past," Rosalia says, her voice like iron. She turns to Leonard, her expression a mix of caution and pride. "But it's the first battle for you, Leonard. Don't get too eager." Leonard meets her gaze with unwavering resolve. "Understood," he shouts, his grip tightening on his sword. He's ready to prove that he's the warrior she raised him to be. Alan is right there by his side, the childhood friendship now transformed into a bond between soldiers. The signal is given, and Rosalia raises her blade, her voice calling for the charge that will define their future. The air is filled with the sound of thousands of hooves and the roar of a desperate army. On the Wayards, Leonard, Leo, leads the charge, his heart burning with the desire to protect his home and fulfill his aunt's legacy. He wants to use every bit of the training she gave him for her sake. But as the army thunders into the fray, a chilling narrator warns us. Little did Leonard know that, beginning from this battle, he would fall into hell. March, year 208 of the Claudian calendar. We find ourselves on the northern roads of Alexis, where the air is thick with the scent of pine and the impending drums of war. This is Alexis territory, a land where nature itself is a fortress. Rosalia, the Duchess of Alexis, is teaching her nephew the first rule of survival here. Use the dense forest to your advantage against the sloppy columns of the invading Edmove army. Even if we're small in numbers, Rosalia explains, we just have to bottleneck them on these narrow roads. Leonard listens intently, his heart pounding. It's time to put those years of training to the test. Arch, the order echoes through the trees. Leonard spurs his horse forward, swearing to himself that he'll use everything his aunt taught him to protect this land. This isn't just a drill anymore. The clash is brutal. Swords ring out against shields as the Alexis cavalry tears through the enemy ranks. Under the sudden pressure, the Edmove forces break, their commanders screaming for a retreat. Back at the encampment, the tension of battle gives way to relief. Rosalia is impressed. For Leonard's first real fight, he handled himself like a veteran out there. The soldiers are already buzzing about it. Bauman and the others can't believe the young prince took down 10 enemies single-handedly. Leonard, humble as ever, can only offer a sheepish smile. But beneath that smile, Leonard is clenching his fist. He remembers the furious charge, the adrenaline, and the pride he saw in Rosalia's eyes. This is what he's been working for. For 9 long years, under the strict guidance of his aunt, he swung his sword every single day. He was the only one who could keep up with her relentless pace, while others fell exhausted by the wayside. But as Leonard approaches her, Rosalia's expression shifts from pride to something more serious. "Leonard," she calls out, her voice cutting through the celebratory mood of the camp. She delivers a sobering lesson. No matter how strong you are, a single person's courage can only do so much. It's a harsh truth for a young warrior who just tasted victory. Leonard gulps, realizing he might have been getting ahead of himself. Courage is good, but in a real war, is it enough to stop a full-scale invasion? He knows the answer is no. Rosalia grins, her eyes flashing with a strategist's fire. "First, learn the art of war," she tells him. "It's not just about swinging a sword. It's about knowing how to move your pieces on the board." She gives him a firm thump on the chest. Mastering strategy is what will let his bravery truly shine, turning simple courage into the key that unlocks victory. Leonard might not fully get it yet, but he's listening. "All right, everyone, time for our strategy meeting," Rosalia shouts. Leonard watches her cape flutter as she walks away. He's determined to learn every secret of the army from her. Inside the main tent, the knights and soldiers of Alexis gather around the table. They've done well today, but they all know the real fight is just beginning. Rosalia lays it out. Being an even match isn't good enough. As the smaller force, if they settle for a stalemate, they'll be the ones to lose momentum and fuel first. They need more than just defense. She proposes an active defense. She wants to break the army into small, elite groups led by commanders who know every inch of these forests. It's a gamble, but it's their best shot. The plan? Use secret animal trails to strike the enemy's blind sides. Their target isn't the front line, it's the supply wagons at the very back. Strike the lifeline, and the rest of the army withers. Leonard questions if lacking logistics will really make them lose morale. His interruption earns him some heavy stares from the veterans, but Rosalia just chuckles. "You'll see how it goes soon enough." As the camp prepares to move, Leonard catches his aunt outside. The weight of his new responsibility is starting to sink in. She's not just his aunt right now. She's his commander. War isn't just about crossing swords head-on, Leonard. Remember that. Her gaze is unwavering, pushing him to think beyond the tip of his blade. "I will." Leonard's voice is full of resolve. Meanwhile, at the rear of the Admove formation, the transport soldiers are plodding along, completely unaware of the eyes watching them from the trees. The Admove transport soldiers laugh and joke, convinced their massive numbers make them untouchable. They have no idea that their vital supply wagons have just become the target of surgical strike they won't even see coming. "Charge!" Leonard bursts from the forest like a silver bolt of lightning. This isn't just an attack. It's the destruction of the enemy's very lifeline. As the ambush tears through their logistics, a devastating chain reaction is about to be felt throughout the entire Admove camp. In the enemy camp, the devastation from Leonard's ambush is immediate. The Admove transport soldiers are in a panic. Rations are gone, liquor is destroyed, and they don't even have hay for the horses. Morale is plummeting faster than their supply count. The desperation leads to chaos. Soldiers are deserting, refusing to die of hunger in a remote land. Their commanders scream in frustration, calling them cowards, but the fear of starvation is far more potent than any military discipline. Meanwhile, in the Alexis camp, things look much brighter. Bauman reports that the enemy is losing morale and their attacks have become sluggish. Their numbers are decreasing even without direct combat. But Rosalia warns them not to let their guard down. Even stray dogs turn violent when they're hungry. "We don't allow violent customers at Restaurant Alexis." Rosalia jokes, her eyes sharp. "Make them go back hungry." The camp erupts in laughter, the spirit of victory keeping their hearts light for the moment. It's now June 2008. 5 months into the war, Leonard is still confident. When asked about missing relief supplies from the nation, he brushes it off. Mistakes happen, and besides, Rosalia has enough supplies stored at Lynt to last a year. "Fear not," Leonard declares with a bright smile. "We, the Alexis army, will win." His optimism is contagious, fueling the hope of his friends and fellow soldiers. Leonard watches his aunt from a distance, feeling a mix of pride and pity for their enemies. As Alan cheers to their victory, Leonard feels they've already won. But Rosalia, standing apart, seems weighed down by thoughts she hasn't shared. The laughter of the soldiers continues in the background as Rosalia steps away. But the news she just received is grim. Another ship has sunk. The pattern is becoming too frequent to be a coincidence. Rosalia sighs, the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. First, the cargo was attacked by bandits, and now this. She tells her messenger to keep it a secret. High morale is precious, and she won't risk breaking it yet. There's no harm in high morale. She thinks, but a shadow crosses her face. This uncomfortable feeling, this bad omen, she can't shake it. Something is very wrong. She looks at the map, tracing the routes from the imperial capital to Lynt. The Alexis army takes the brunt of the war to defend the nation's territory, and in exchange, they should be receiving relief from the entire Claude Empire. And yet, the supplies never arrive. Leonard notices her deep in thought, but doesn't yet understand the gravity of the situation. Late August arrives. Finally, relief supplies pull into the camp. Rosalia is relieved, but the soldiers are confused. 300 soldiers to escort a domestic delivery? It seems like complete overkill for a troop of that size. The relief is short-lived. A messenger from Count Adonia, Alan's father, slips a scroll to Rosalia. As she reads it, her face contorts in anger. TCH, she spits out, the contents of the letter confirming her worst fears. She immediately orders Leonard and the others to the barracks. The playful atmosphere of the camp vanishes, replaced by a cold, urgent tension as Rosalia prepares to reveal the truth. Inside the meeting, the truth comes out. The four court nobles have been pressuring the lords of each state to fake accidents so relief supplies would never reach Alexis. It's calculated sabotage from within their own empire. Leonard is furious, slamming his fist down in anger. Why would they? The four court nobles don't have the right to. He can't believe the very people they are fighting for are the ones stabbing them in the back. Rosalia clenches her hand, her expression one of cold, hard realization. We are then introduced to the four court nobles, the true rulers of the Claude Empire. With their immense status and financial power, they've reduced the emperor to a mere figurehead. They are the shadows pulling the strings from behind the throne. Bauman calls them what they are, bastards who will do anything to fill their own pockets. They're willing to lose territory if it means they gain power. Amidst the betrayal, a young female soldier speaks up with determination. They are fighting for their motherland, regardless of the corruption at the top. Rosalia listens, her mind already calculating their next move. Rosalia explains the brutal truth to Leonard. To the nobles, she is a nail that sticks out because she made Alexis too prosperous. They want her to die in action here, so they can reclaim control. They likely believe that by the time Admove invades again, she'll be too old to stop them, or dead. Leonard is stunned. No way. The logistics will only get harder once winter hits. The invading Admove army will be caught in the snowy roads, needing a tremendous amount of firewood just to survive the nights. Rosalia hopes to end the war by then, believing that if they don't make any foolish moves, their current supplies will be enough. The meeting ends with a collective phew as the commanders try to process the political betrayal. They are alone in the north, cut off by their own people, with a harsh winter looming ahead. Leonard stands in silence, his worldview shattered. Rosalia watches them leave, her eyes narrow. It'd be okay if it was just me. She thinks, but they're trying to do away with Alexis as well. The bastards. The battle is no longer just against Admove. It's against the very heart of the empire she serves. Early December 208. Winter has arrived, and it's even more brutal than they imagined. On the battlefield, the fighting is desperate and bloody. Leonard is in the thick of it, his face stained with dirt and sweat as he shouts why against the wind. The hope they held in autumn is beginning to freeze. Rosalia leads one final, desperate charge, her voice hoarse as she commands her troops to keep pushing. By all logic, the war should be over, The Admove army is down to 10,000 men, decimated by casualties and desertion. But the victory they all anticipated in autumn has been swallowed by a frozen nightmare, leaving the soldiers to wonder how they fell so far, so fast. Then, the famine truly strikes. In the camp, the once proud Alexis army is reduced to chaos, fighting over meager scraps of food while brothers-in-arms turn on each other for a spoonful of soup. Watching his comrades fall apart from hunger and despair, Leonard is left with a question that burns through the winter cold. A question that is about to erupt in a scream of pure frustration. Then why? Leonard screams in his mind, his hand clenching his sword until his knuckles turn white. He looks at the fallen Admove soldiers, their faces frozen in the snow. If the enemy is suffering just as much as they are, why won't they just retreat? Why continue this senseless slaughter in the middle of a brutal winter? The battlefield is a cacophony of howling winds and the clash of steel. Leonard can't understand it. It's already winter, the season where armies usually retreat to wait for spring. Yet the Admove forces keep coming, driven by a desperate, suicidal persistence that defies all military logic. Was Anne off the mark? Or had we just underestimated them? Leonard wonders as he leads another charge. Rosalia had predicted the war would be over by winter, but the reality is far more grim. Both sides are pushed to their breaking point, fueled by nothing but sheer, stubborn survival. Destroy Alexis, and make it our territory no matter what. The enemy's command echoes through the frozen woods. For the Admove soldiers, there is no turning back. They are just as trapped as the Alexis army, caught in a cycle of blood and ice where the only way out is forward. The scene shifts far away from the frozen front lines to a warm, opulent palace. Here, the piercing cold is nothing but a topic of casual conversation. Especially up north, it seems that it's freezing cold. Haha. The contrast is sickening. Luxury built on the backs of starving soldiers. The four court nobles sit around a table overflowing with food, their silhouettes dark and ominous against the golden light. They find the suffering of Alexis entertaining, a fun show of dogs fighting one another in hunger. They've sent word to Admove to just hang in there a little longer, knowing Alexis is on the brink of starvation. Back at the camp, the truth is finally laid bare. The four court nobles gave the enemies secret information that our rations will run out in a few months. The realization of this ultimate betrayal ripples through the command tent. They aren't just fighting an enemy in front of them, but a dagger in their back. Leonard slams his fists onto the table, his face twisted in a mixture of shock and pure rage. They're going that far. The thought that his own countrymen would sacrifice an entire army just to get rid of Rosalia is almost too much to bear. Incomprehensible! The other knights shout, their teeth grinding in frustration. This is how the four court nobles work. No honor, no loyalty, only the ruthless pursuit of power. They're trying to entrap Alexis by any means necessary, even if it means handing victory to the enemy. Damn it! Alan shouts, his voice cracking with emotion. Surely the true enemies are the four court nobles, the nobles leeching off the nation. The anger in the tent is palpable, a fire that matches the freezing cold outside. They're fighting a war on two fronts now. That's enough. Rosalia's voice cuts through the anger. She stands calm and resolute at the head of the table. Cursing them won't change anything. We just need to do what ought to be done. She knows this is now part of the war situation, and panicking will only lead to a faster defeat. Rosalia's mind is already working on a solution. She'll strengthen the dispatch of envoys to other nobles and request help, even if they require much in return. She knows the cost will be high, but for her, saving Alexis is the only priority. Leonard watches her, inspired by her unwavering strength even in the face of total betrayal. My precious Alexis, like hell we'll let them crush. The thought lingers over a landscape of snow-covered tents. The winter has turned the once vibrant camp into a graveyard of hope, but the fire of resistance still flickers in the dark. How long has it been since the war started? In every fight, so much blood is shed. The images of combat blur into a singular nightmare of steel and screams. In the command tent, the mood is grim as they look at the battered helmets of their fallen brothers. Every victory feels hollow when you're starving. We can't fight with this, eating less with each passing week. The rations are now just a watery soup with a single piece of potato. Even as the commanders order a retreat to reorganize, the soldiers know the truth. They're being hollowed out from the inside. Like hell we'll let them have Alexis. They cry, but their voices are weak. A soldier stares into his empty bowl, a single tear tracking through the dirt on his face. I can't see the end. The weight of the famine is finally breaking the spirits of the Kitely Alexis army. Hunger is a foe you can't parry with a sword. Alan looks at Leonard, his eyes sunken and tired. We were winning by so much, and now we're on a losing streak. Who would have thought? Leonard says nothing, his face set in a grim mask of determination. He refuses to let the despair take him, even as he carries a wounded comrade back to the lines. A sword stands stuck in the frozen earth, reflecting the image of the hollow-eyed soldiers passing by. A troop without morale would be so weak. It's a bitter lesson in the reality of warfare. Without food and without hope, even the bravest knights are reduced to shadows of their former selves. The enemy reaches the gates of Lynt. Grah! Don't let them get to Lynt, no matter what. Bauman screams as the Alexis cavalry makes a desperate stand. They're fighting for their homes now, their families, their very existence. The line must hold, or all is lost. April 209. To think they'd be driven to a siege. Leonard stands on the castle walls, looking down at his burning town. The smoke rises into the sky, a funeral pyre for the life they used to know. Evacuate the civilians to the castle is the final, desperate order. A child cries out for their mother, the sound piercing through the roar of the flames. Rosalia stands before the terrified civilians and the exhausted soldiers. It's time to show them what elections are made of. All who can bear arms, to the front. The people respond with a roar. They aren't just there to be protected. They're there to fight for their home. They will fight together until the very end. Leonard watches them, a new flame of hope ignited by their sheer defiance. Inside the castle, the reality of the siege is heart-wrenching. I am hungry. I want to eat more. A child wails, while others fight over the smallest scraps of food. Leonard can only watch in silence, his heart breaking at the sight of the people he swore to protect. NGH. There's nothing I can do, he thinks, the helplessness more painful than any wound. Rosalia approaches a crying child and their mother. With a gentle smile, she holds out a piece of potato, the only food she has. Hang in there with this. Don't give Mommy too much trouble now. It's a small gesture, but it means everything in a world where food is more precious than gold. The mother can only look on in shock as her commander gives away her own meal. And no, Lady Rosalia. That's four. The soldiers protest, but Rosalia just grins. I owe all the Alexis my life. I'm not going to let something like this get me down. Her selfless spirit is the glue holding them together, a lighthouse in the storm of their despair. Leonard looks at her, the lesson of true leadership finally sinking in. The child stops crying, clutching the potato as if it were a holy relic. Leonard watches, tears stinging his eyes. Rosalia ruffles his hair with a playful attagirl to the child and then looks at Leonard. Listen, from now on, don't water the seeds of sorrow, all right? It's a lesson her own sister taught her, and now she passes it on to the next generation of Alexis heroes. This is the spirit of hope that will lead them out of the dark. The mother and child look at Rosalia with eyes full of gratitude, the small piece of potato feeling like a mountain of hope. Rosalia walks away with a simple yes, ma'am, to their thanks, her silhouette tall and steady. Leonard watches her, realizing that true strength isn't just about winning battles, but about sustaining the hearts of the people when all is lost. But the reality of the siege is a nightmare that won't end. They're right on top of us. A soldier screams as the castle walls are breached. The ground is littered with the fallen, and the air is thick with the scent of blood and despair. "Mother!" A dying man whispers, his blood staining the cold stone floor. The relief squad is nowhere to be found. Leonard, panting and covered in dirt, looks around the battlefield in shock. If this isn't hell, then what is? He can't understand how things could have gone so wrong so fast. Rosalia, her face set in a grim mask, realizes the truth. They're all afraid of the four court nobles after all. The aid they were promised will never come. They have been left to die. The desperation drives them to the ultimate sacrifice. There's no other way. This is the only way for the people to survive. The knights, men who treat their horses as brothers, are forced to kill them for meat. Cries of "I'm so sorry" echo through the stables as they do what they must to keep the town alive for another week. The sound of a horse's final neigh is the soundtrack to their heartbreak. Leonard stands before his own horse, his hand trembling as he strokes its neck. "Forgive me, I have to keep going." The bond of a lifetime is severed in a single, painful moment of necessity. In a war of starvation, even love has a price. Because tears are watering the seeds of sorrow, Leonard thinks, his eyes burning with a new, dark resolve. He swallows his grief with every bite of the food that cost him his friend. In the background, the camp is a silent graveyard of the living, everyone waiting for the end. "Thank you for the food," he whispers, the words tasting like ash. Rosalia moves through the wounded, her presence the only thing keeping the madness at bay. "Drink it nice and slow," she tells a soldier, her voice a calm anchor in a sea of suffering. But for some, the hunger has already taken their minds. A soldier sits in the shadows, munching on something he shouldn't, whispering, "I can't take it anymore," as the line between man and beast begins to blur. A soldier lets out a bone-chilling scream, his eyes wide and vacant as the hunger finally snaps his mind. Leonard and Alan watch in horror, the reality of their situation hitting them with the force of a physical blow. Starvation isn't just a slow death of the body, it's a violent death of the soul. Rosalia catches a sobbing soldier as he collapses, his body trembling with the weight of his suffering. I'm sorry, he wails. Rosalia holds him, her own heart breaking for her men. "Forgive me, it's because I'm not good enough," she whispers, taking the entire burden of their failure onto herself. Leonard can only watch, his sword drawn against an enemy he can't even see. Just when will be the end of this hell? The soldier's question hangs in the air, unanswered by anything but the sound of his own weeping. Rosalia just holds him tighter, a mother to an entire army of the damned. "It's okay. I'll end it all soon," she promises, the words a vow and a threat to the world that abandoned them. Blood drips from her hands, but her eyes are clear. April 1st, year 209 of the Claudian calendar. The day of the final decision. Rosalia stands on the castle walls, looking out over the ruins of her capital. "We're getting our people out westward to Kursend," she declares. "The town of Lynt, their home, must be abandoned. The courtyard is a scene of carnage, littered with the bodies of those who didn't survive the winter. Any more of this, and we'll have people eating each other." The brutal assessment is the final nail in the coffin. Rosalia knows they have no other choice. The people in the castle will have to suffer as refugees for heaven knows how long, but at least they'll be alive. The alternative is too horrific to even contemplate. Rosalia looks at Leonard, her eyes reflecting the fire of the burning town. "Aunt Rosalia, what's this place?" he had once asked as a child. "It's my territory, the state of Alexis," she had replied with pride. Now, she's the one giving the order. "We will abandon our capital, Lynt. Those who can fight, bring the enemies to a standstill here for 2 weeks. Buy time for our people to escape." Leonard can't believe it. Their home gone. There's no time to look back. Keep your eyes locked on hope. Rosalia's voice rings out like a trumpet over the chaos. Her face is a picture of defiance, a warrior who refuses to be broken by fate. "It's not over yet. As long as we're alive, we'll make it somehow." She is the spark that will keep the spirit of Alexis alive, even in exile. The soldiers and knights line up, inspired by her unwavering strength. Even Bauman, wounded and bandaged, stands tall. Leonard clenches his fist, his heart swelling with a mix of sorrow and pride. On hope, he whispers, the words becoming his new creed. They aren't just an army anymore. They are a family, united by a common tragedy and a single, desperate goal. The people of Alexis step forward, their faces set in grim determination. We will give our lives to you. We, the people of Alexis, will follow you to the bitter end. The roar of their loyalty shakes the very foundations of the castle. They haven't lost their spirit. They've just found a new reason to fight. Rosalia looks at them, her eyes softening for a brief moment before turning back to the task at hand. Take a look, Leonard. Everyone here has lively, shining eyes. It's not gone yet. Rosalia says, her voice full of a strange, quiet pride. Leonard looks at the crowd and sees it too. The spark of defiance that even starvation couldn't extinguish. They're the true heart of Alexis, and as long as they live, the state can never truly fall. That's right, the light of hope is still shining brightly before our eyes. The swords are raised as one, a forest of steel gleaming in the pale spring sun. That goes for all of US. The cry is a collective oath, a promise to the past, and a challenge to the future. They're the kites of Alexis, and they will not go quietly into the night. We will march towards hope no matter what. The final shout echoes through the burning streets of Lynt as the evacuation begins. May the spirit of Alexis live on with Lady Rosalia. Leonard stands at the rear, looking back one last time at the town he grew up in. They're leaving their home behind, but they're taking their hope with them. The journey westward has begun, and the legend of the Eighth Prince is just getting started. The Alexis army had no choice but to abandon Lynt, the state capital. It was a painful, tragic retreat under the relentless offensive of the Admove army, but their primary goal now was simply to survive. In the chaos of the withdrawal, every soldier fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, swords clashing as they struggled to buy even a few more seconds for their comrades to escape. Rosalia barked out orders, her voice cutting through the din of battle. She commanded Leonard to stay focused on the enemies directly in front of him, refusing to let him falter even for a moment. Watching her back, Leonard couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. To him, Rosalia had always been so far ahead, a dependable pillar of strength that he could only hope to emulate one day. With a final roar, they pushed back the immediate wave of attackers. "All right, onwards," Rosalia shouted, leading the way through the blood-soaked terrain. But the relief was short-lived. A scout arrived with terrifying news. A fresh pursuit troop of over 1,000 Admove soldiers was headed their way, threatening to crush their remaining forces. The enemy commander laughed, mockingly declaring that it was over for both Alexis and Leonard. He looked down on them with a cruel grin, confident in his overwhelming numbers. Leonard didn't give him a second chance to boast. In a flash of steel, he lunged forward and decapitated the arrogant knight, his movements a blur of lethal precision. However, Rosalia's expression remained grim. She knew the situation was dire and ordered Leonard to leave the battlefield and escape first, intending to hold the line herself. She spoke of the harsh reality of being a general, a lousy job where you sometimes have to sacrifice your own allies. She wanted to choose her own end under her own orders. Rosalia's eyes burned with a fierce determination. She refused to let the deaths of her retainers be in vain and demanded that Leonard survive to see the future of their people. Leonard looked at her, his heart heavy, but his resolve hardening. Rosalia gave him a small, rare smile, a silent promise that she would see to it that he wouldn't rot in this forgotten battle. In that moment, Leonard's mind flashed back to his childhood. Rosalia had always been his source of hope, the one who gave him a reason to live and showed him the way forward. As Rosalia stayed behind at the bottleneck to hold off the horde, Leonard gripped his sword tighter. He knew he had to protect the hope she had entrusted to him, even if it cost him everything. Just then, Shara rushed in with more bad news. The main troops had been met with a surprise attack by highly skilled enemy cavalry. They were truly trapped on all sides. The final battle, weaving a single strand of hope, was about to begin. The odds were impossible, but the Alexis soldiers had nowhere left to run. April 15th, year 209. Leonard stood at the front, his gaze fixed on the enemy. His aunt had left this to him, and he wouldn't let her down. He was the commander now. Here we go. Leonard's roar echoed through the trees as he led his remaining men in a desperate charge against the advancing Edmove lines. He fought like a man possessed, his blades slicing through armor and flesh alike. He had to get through this. He had to reach the main forces, no matter the cost. "Fuck off!" Leonard screamed, his anger boiling over into something primal. The enemy soldiers began to falter, terrified by the sheer ferocity of the young knight's assault. Seeing the boy as a monster, the enemy soldiers hesitated, but their commanders pushed them forward. "I'll do as you wish," Leonard whispered, his eyes narrowing. "I'll slay you all, whether it's 1,000 or 2,000. Leonard's transformation was nearly complete, his power peaking as he threw himself into the thickest part of the fight. But the Edmove army had one more trick up their sleeve. A line of archers appeared, their bows drawn and aimed directly at the center of the Alexis forces, at Leonard himself. Fire! A lethal rain of arrows descended upon the battlefield, the sky darkening as they sought their mark. Shafts tore through Leonard's armor and bit deep into his flesh, yet he stood his ground, a lone, blood-soaked silhouette refusing to collapse under the weight of the onslaught. Bloodied and bristling with arrows, Leonard's gaze locked onto the archers through a blur of agony. But as the pain reached its limit, a strange, chilling stillness began to take hold of his senses, marking the birth of the terrifying legend the enemy would soon whisper in fear: the ogre. In the thick of the arrow rain, Leonard's perception shifted. Time seemed to slow down, and he realized with startling clarity that he could see it. Every projectile, every enemy movement. Despite the arrows piercing his armor, his focus became laser-sharp. He didn't just endure the barrage, he pushed through it. Each arrow that struck him only served to fuel a rising, unnatural heat within his veins, a power that had been dormant until this very moment of desperation. Standing amidst the carnage, multiple arrows buried in his flesh, Leonard looked more like a demon than a man. His soldiers watched in stunned silence before erupting into cheers for Lord Leo, unaware that the person they knew was rapidly being replaced by something else. The Edmove archers were paralyzed by fear. Their commander screamed for another volley, his voice cracking as he witnessed a human being refuse to die. To them, the young prince had become an impossible nightmare that their steel could not stop. Then, Leonard exploded into motion. With superhuman speed, he leaped into the air, his blade carving through the enemy cavalry like a scythe through wheat. He was a whirlwind of blood and steel, slaughtering everything in his path with a primal, terrifying grace. The battlefield turned into a slaughterhouse. Leonard's movements were so savage, so alien, that the Edmove soldiers began to scream in terror. They pleaded for their lives, but Leonard's eyes held no mercy, only the cold, burning intent to destroy. A panicked soldier stared into Leonard's eyes and saw nothing human left in them. Leonard's face was a mask of gore, his teeth bared in a snarl that belonged to a predator, not a prince. In that moment, the myth of the ogre was born. Leonard loomed over the enemy commander, mocking the man's chattering teeth. He gave them a choice: flee and live with the memory of this hell, or stay and be consumed by it. The once proud Edmove officer was reduced to a quivering mess. The Alexis soldiers, including Bauman and the others, watched with a mixture of awe and growing dread. Leonard's eyes glowed with a predatory light as he grabbed an enemy, his smile widening into a terrifying, blood-soaked grin. "Do you?" he hissed, challenging their very souls. "Then fuck off already," Leonard roared, his voice more like a beast than a man's. He stood atop a mountain of corpses, a literal monster on the battlefield. The Idmove army broke completely, their spirit shattered by the ogre of Alexis. The shadow of Leonard's monstrous power loomed over the retreating horde. The Idmove soldiers scrambled over each other to escape, their terrified cries echoing through the woods. "We have an ogre!" The tide of the war had shifted in a single, bloody instance. As the enemy vanished into the distance, a heavy silence fell. Leonard's own men were frightened by the power their prince had displayed. He stood alone, the dust of battle settling on his blood-drenched form, the ogre slowly receding back into the man. Alan was the first to approach, cautiously patting Leonard on the shoulder. "You did it, Leo," he said, his voice filled with relief. Leonard's eyes regained their human focus, the battle trance finally breaking as he realized they had survived the impossible. The soldiers began to cheer, celebrating their victory, but Leonard remained grounded in the harsh reality. "It's not over yet," he reminded them. They had held the enemy back, but the cost was high, and the main army was still in danger. Rallying his spirits, Leonard raised his sword high. "Let's hurry and catch up to the main troops," he commanded. His display of power had given them new life, and they followed him with renewed vigor, dashing through the forest to find their comrades. As they ran, Leonard's only thought was of Rosalia. "Please wait for us, Aunt Rosalia," he pleaded internally. He knew she had stayed behind to hold the most dangerous position, and the fear of losing her was the only thing that could still shake him. Leonard pushed himself to the limit, his eyes scanning the path ahead. He saw a riderless horse in the distance, and his heart hammered against his ribs. He told himself this hell would be over soon, desperate to believe they would all make it out alive. But as they entered another clearing, the cheers of victory were replaced by the heavy silence of death. Broken weapons and fallen Alexis soldiers littered the ground, painting a picture of a desperate, final stand that had happened while they were fighting elsewhere. Leonard stood frozen as he heard the cries of his men finding their fallen friends. The news of Lord Robert's death hit him like a physical blow. The path they were following was no longer a route to safety, but a trail of tragedy. The survivors were in shock. Alan and the others looked around at the massacre, their faces pale. The Idmove army was nowhere to be seen, leaving behind only the evidence of their cruelty. "This is horrible," Alan whispered, mirroring the horror in everyone's hearts. Panicked and desperate, Leonard started running again, his voice cracking as he called out for his aunt. He ignored his own wounds, his mind consumed by a single name. "Aunt!" He screamed into the silent forest, his men struggling to keep up with his frantic pace. He finally found a cluster of soldiers huddled together. "Aunt Rosalia, where are you?" he shouted. A weak, familiar voice answered his cry, and Leonard's heart stopped. He turned toward the sound, a sense of impending doom washing over him. Leonard shoved his way through the crowd of weeping soldiers, his breathing shallow. "Let me through," he pleaded. When the path finally cleared, he saw the figure on the ground, and his entire world seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Rosalia lay broken on the grass, her life's blood staining the earth as a single arrow protruded from her chest armor. Even at the brink of death, she managed a weak, bloody smile, dismissing the soldiers' apologies with a faint laugh that chilled Leonard to the bone. He could only stare, his mind fracturing as the image of his invincible aunt began to fade into a grim reality. As the surrounding soldiers wept in helpless silence, Leonard's mind retreated into a state of total denial. He looked around with a manic, flickering smile, pleading with Alan to help him move her, insisting that it wasn't too late for a miracle. But the crushing weight of the truth was starting to take its toll, leaving his body trembling as he prepared for a fall he couldn't stop. Alan caught Leonard as he stumbled, trying to keep his friend from falling apart. Leonard's voice was a ragged mess of grief and denial, swearing that he was the one who was supposed to protect Aunt Rosalia with his own hands. But the reality of the arrow in her chest was a truth too heavy to bear. "Leonard, yes, you're here," Rosalia whispered, her voice fading like embers in the wind. She reached out with a trembling hand, asking him to come closer for just one last moment. The battlefield around them seemed to fall silent as the young prince knelt by her side. A faint, proud smile played on Rosalia's bloodied lips. She told Leonard she knew he could make it back, that she never doubted him for a second. Leonard clutched her hand, his body shaking with suppressed sobs as Alan watched on, his own heart breaking for his friend. The weight of the situation finally settled in. "Seems like this is the end for me," Rosalia admitted, her gaze growing distant. Leonard could only look at her with wide, haunted eyes, his mouth working but no words coming out except a silent plea for forgiveness. Even as life drained from her, Rosalia remained a teacher. She told Leonard that while she had taught him the art of war, he still had a long way to go to reach his full potential. "Never stop improving yourself," she urged, her eyes searching his for a spark of the leader he was meant to be. Leonard's grief turned into a desperate resolve. He told her he wasn't a child anymore who needed her protection, that he had learned how to stand on his own. Behind them, the survivors of the Alexis army stood in somber silence, witnessing the passing of an era. "Is that so? That's a relief," Rosalia sighed, her expression softening into one of peace. She entrusted the future to him, telling Leonard that from here on out, he was the one who must lead everyone forward through the darkness that was coming. She spoke of the heavy burden of leadership, the need to light the path to their people's happiness so they wouldn't get lost in the despair of defeat. Leonard listened, the words etching themselves onto his soul even as his face was wet with tears. "I'll leave the rest in his hands." Rosalia's gaze drifted toward the soldiers. Leonard's resolve hardened into a vow. "I will," he shouted, a promise made to the dying woman that would define the rest of his life. Everyone present felt the weight of that oath. Rosalia asked for forgiveness for being selfish, for breaking her promise to return together with all of them. The soldiers around her couldn't hold back their tears any longer, their voices breaking as they cried out that it was they who should be asking for her forgiveness. Memories of her kindness and strength flooded back to the men. They spoke of how they had always relied on her, how she had encouraged them even in their darkest hours. "You gave your utmost for Alexis, and for us," they sobbed, kneeling in the mud. Rosalia just smiled at their sorrow. "As a feudal lord, I'm blessed to be depended on," she said, her pride in her people shining through even now. She had lived for Alexis, and she was content to die for it, but she had one final wish she wanted to fulfill before the end. "I'd like to take one last look at Lynt," she coughed, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Leonard didn't hesitate. He gently lifted her into his arms, his movements careful and tender, as if she were the most fragile thing in the world. Rosalia leaned into him, her breathing shallow. Shara, a young warrior with silver-white hair and a look of deep sorrow, could only watch and weep as Leonard carried the Duchess toward the ridge. The commoners and soldiers alike stood aside, their hearts heavy as they watched their leader take her final journey toward the view of the capital. They reached the edge of the forest where the city was visible in the distance. "Can you see it?" Leonard asked, his voice trembling. Rosalia looked out with half-closed eyes, a soft, satisfied expression crossing her face. "Yes, I can see it well," she whispered. In her mind, the images of her beloved capital flashed by. The city she had built with such care, the place she called her treasure. She remembered the warmth of the people and the beauty of the streets, far more precious to her than any imperial capital could ever be. It was her legacy and her home. Rosalia's thoughts turned to simple things. "I'd like to have Matthew stew one last time, she murmured. Leonard broke down, sobbing that he would accompany her, that they would have Matthew make plenty of stew for both of them as soon as they got back home. One last time. The phrase echoed in the air, a litany of things she would never do again. Her mind was a collage of the life she was leaving behind. Training sessions, celebrations with her men, and the quiet moments in the city she loved so much. "I can think of so many things I want," she chuckled weakly. Rosalia looked at Leonard with eyes full of regret. "I'm such a disgraceful woman. Being like this when I'm about to die," she muttered, cursing the weakness that was finally taking hold. But Leonard didn't see a disgraceful woman. he saw the strongest person he had ever known. Leonard remembered how he had always followed her, driven by a deep sense of admiration that had shaped his entire childhood. To him, she was the standard to which all knights should be measured. "I'll keep on following you," he vowed, his heart breaking as the end drew near. "Don't cry over some old woman dying," Rosalia teased gently, though her own eyes were misting over. She gave him one final lesson: to become a man who puts the happiness of others first. "I told you not to water the seeds of sorrow, didn't I?" she reminded him with a final, heartbreaking smile. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his armor. She marveled at how Leonard had been defending their motherland with such fragile hands, hands that were now covered in blood and grime. "Don't be like her," she whispered, her voice barely a breath as her hand began to drop. Leonard clutched her hand, his fist clenched tight. He could feel the life leaving her body. Rosalia's last words were a command and a prayer. "Make them pay for this." The fire in her eyes flickered one last time before beginning to fade forever. "And be happy." With those final words, Rosalia's hand went limp, her spirit finally taking flight. Leonard pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder as he let out a silent, soul-crushing sob. The lioness of Alexis was gone, leaving behind a boy who was no longer just a prince, but a man now forced to carry the crushing weight of an entire nation's future. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the woods, broken only by the sound of Leonard's grief. He held her body tightly, with the distant city of Lynt standing as a silent witness to the treasure she had sacrificed everything for. This was the moment everything changed, where the innocence of youth was buried alongside his mentor, making way for the legend of Nosferatu. Leonard clutched Rosalia's body, his silent screams turning into a deluge of tears. The person who had been his entire world was gone, and the weight of her sacrifice was almost too much for his young heart to bear. In her final moments, Rosalia looked at her men one last time, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She thanked them for following her all this time, her heart full as she entrusted the future of Alexis to Leonard. The lioness passed away with a smile, finally at peace. But while Alexis mourned, the political vipers in the Claude Empire were already striking. In the safety of the palace, nobles mocked the Alexis army's defeat. They twisted the stories of Leonard's survival into something grotesque, whispered by those who had never stepped foot on a battlefield. A mysterious noble with a sinister glint in his "I led the smear campaign." He mocked Leonard as a mongrel and spread a dark tale that the prince had only survived by drinking the blood of his enemies and allies alike. To them, Leonard was no longer a hero, but a monster. The name they whispered was as cold as death itself. Nosferatu, the vampire prince, a name meant to strip Leonard of his humanity and paint him as a devil to be feared and loathed by the empire he had just served. May 1st, year 209. The capital of the Claude Empire was buzzing with gossip. Word had spread that the Nosferatu prince was returning to give his after-action report on the tragedy at Alexis. The atmosphere in the city was thick with suspicion. Leonard rode through the streets on a white horse, his face a mask of cold indifference. All around him, the citizens mumble and whisper, their eyes filled with dread and disgust. They watched him as if he truly were a demon in human flesh. Nosferatu, the people hissed under their breath. They believed the rumors that he lived off the blood of others to survive. Leonard didn't flinch, even as the fearful whispers followed him like a shadow through the capital. His friends, however, could not remain silent. Alan and the others shouted back at the crowd, telling them to stop their groundless rumors. They defended Leonard as a warrior who had fought and bled for his nation, but their words fell on deaf ears. The hostility of the capital was a bitter contrast to the sacrifice Leonard and his men had made. The whispering was constant, a psychological assault meant to break the spirit of the survivors of Alexis. Alan leaned in, urging Leonard to ignore their thoughtless talk. But Leonard simply looked ahead, his voice calm and detached. "Don't worry, I'm not bothered," he said. He had already faced a real hell. These words were nothing compared to that. In his mind, Rosalia's last words echoed, "Be happy." It was a simple wish, but in the face of such cold rejection from his own people, it seemed like an impossible task. Leonard realized with a heavy heart that all his happiness had been tied to Alexis. Everything he loved, the people he cherished, and the woman who had raised him, they were all gone, swallowed by the war. He remembered the soldiers and the citizens who had believed in Rosalia, the people who were now either dead or suffering under the boots of the Admove army. They were the ones she had told him to lead. He thought back to the Lynt she had built, a city full of life and joy. It was her treasure, and she had passed the responsibility of protecting that legacy to him with her final breath. She left it in my hands. Leonard's resolve began to burn again. He would learn to be the man she wanted, the leader who could put the happiness of others before his own, even if his own heart was empty. As they rode deeper into the city, Leonard's eyes lost their sadness and were replaced by a cold, calculating fire. He was no longer the boy who needed protection. He was a lord with a singular purpose. Alan and the others looked at Leonard, sensing the change in his atmosphere. "What are you trying to say, Leo?" Alan asked, his voice filled with concern. The prince's silence was more telling than any words could be. "We survived that war," Leonard said at last, his gaze hard. They were alive, but the battle had cost them their territory, their pride, and their loved ones. They had lost everything, but they had not lost their lives. There were things they could never get back, like Rosalia's laughter. But as Leonard looked at his men, he knew there were definitely things they could reclaim. The spirit of Alexis was still alive in them. "So, I've decided." Leonard stopped his horse, his voice ringing with a new authority. The time for mourning was over. The time for his revenge and his reclamation had finally arrived. With his fist clenched tight, Leonard made his ultimate vow. That I'll get Alexis back, no matter what it takes. The grand prologue of his journey had come to a close, and the age of the Nosferatu prince was only just beginning.